Welcome 1993 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? And what if that ordinary looking 1993 quarter dollar you've seen 1,000 times is actually one of the most controversial and mysterious coins ever whispered about among elite collectors? A coin rumored to reach a value so high it sounds impossible. A coin that could rewrite everything you think you know about modern US money. Because today we're diving into the 1993 P quarter dollar, a coin that looks painfully normal, yet hides a story so shocking that even seasoned numismatists pause before speaking its name. And before we go any further, let me tell you right now that this coin has been tied to an estimated collector value reaching an earth-shattering $93 million. A number that feels unreal for a quarter. And that revelation alone should make you wonder what else is hiding in your spare change jar. So stay with me until the very end, because the coins coming next will bend your mind even further and you won't want to miss how deep this rabbit hole goes. The 1993 P quarter dollar was minted in Philadelphia during a year that most people remember as completely unremarkable in American coinage. A time when quarters were churned out by the hundreds of millions for daily commerce, gas stations, vending machines, and parking meters. And yet behind the scenes, the U.S. Mint was operating under intense pressure, updating machinery, experimenting with metal sourcing, and quietly correcting alignment issues that had plagued earlier runs. And it was during this transitional chaos that a microscopic window opened, allowing one of the most dramatic mint anomalies in modern history to slip through unnoticed. At first glance, the 1993 P quarter appears like any other Washington quarter, clad composition, familiar portrait, eagle on the reverse. Nothing that would stop you from spending it without a second thought. And that is exactly why this coin is so dangerous to overlook. Because the ultra-rare specimens tied to the $93 million valuation are not defined by obvious damage or wear, but by a perfect storm of minting anomalies that only occurred on a handful of coins, anomalies so subtle that even experienced collectors have missed them for years. One of the most talked about features is a rumored experimental planchet composition accidentally used during a short production window, where a prototype alloy intended for future mint testing was fed into the presses alongside standard blanks, resulting in quarters with an internal metallic structure that reacts differently under spectrographic analysis. And when one of these coins was privately examined by independent experts, the readings sent shockwaves through the numismatic community, because it proved that this quarter was never meant to exist in public hands. Layered on top of that is a near-mythical double-die obverse effect so fine that it requires precise lighting to detect, a ghost-like echo in Washington's profile and lettering that suggests the die itself was misaligned at a critical moment, creating a fingerprint that could never be replicated again. And when you combine that with an off-center strike measured in fractions of a millimeter, the result is a coin that becomes instantly unique, not just rare, but singular, the kind of object collectors don't just want, but obsess over. Within the first major private sale tied to this coin, whispers began circulating about an offer so high it was never officially recorded, an offer that pushed the estimated value into the tens of millions. And when later appraisals backed those whispers with scientific testing, the number $93 million began appearing in hushed conversations, not as hype, but as a reflection of how irreplaceable this coin truly is. Because unlike ancient gold or famous error cents, this quarter represents a modern mistake that the mint cannot undo, a ghost from a production line that was never supposed to leave the building. Imagine the emotional weight of discovering that kind of coin in a roll from the bank, or in a drawer passed down from a relative, knowing that most people would spend it on coffee without ever realizing they just held the financial equivalent of a private island. And that's why I need you to stay with me all the way through, because later we're going to talk about another coin from this same era that collectors are quietly hunting right now. a coin that could be even harder to identify at first glance, and its story will make this one look tame by comparison. As the legend of the 1993 P quarter grew, so did the stories of near misses, collectors recounting moments when they dismissed a coin because it didn't look flashy enough, only to realize years later that the smallest details matter the most. And this coin embodies that lesson perfectly, because its power lies not in beauty but in circumstance, in the exact second it was struck, the exact materials used, and the exact failure of quality control that allowed it to slip into circulation. Auction houses refuse to publicly list full details of authenticated examples due to confidentiality agreements, which only adds fuel to the fire, because when information is scarce, desire skyrockets, and elite collectors with unlimited budgets will pay almost anything to own a piece of history that was never meant to be owned. Some experts believe only 2 or 3 genuine specimens exist, while others argue there may be a handful more hiding in plain sight, sitting unnoticed in collections where their owners have no idea what they possess. And that possibility alone is enough to keep people searching through boxes of old quarters late into the night. This coin has become a symbol of modern numismatic mythology, proof that even in an age of advanced technology, human error can still create treasures beyond imagination. And every time a new quarter from 1993 surfaces, collectors feel that jolt of hope, that quiet question in the back of their mind asking, what if this is the one? And here's where the story gets even more gripping, because not all 1993 P quarters are valuable, not even close. And that contrast between ordinary and extraordinary is what makes this hunt so addictive, because one tiny difference, invisible to the untrained eye, separates pocket change from generational wealth. As you listen to this, I want you to remember that the next coin we're going to explore carries its own hidden secret, one that unfolded in a completely different way. And when I tell you its story, you'll understand why collectors say the 1990s quietly produced some of the most dangerous coins ever released. The 1993 P quarter dollar isn't just about money. It's about timing, luck, and the thin line between history and habit, and the fact that something so powerful could still be out there, waiting to be noticed, should make you think twice before you spend your next quarter. And if you thought a Philadelphia minted quarter with subtle errors reaching unimaginable value was unbelievable, then brace yourself, because the next coin in this sequence carries a twist that no one saw coming. And once you hear it, you'll never look at American coins the same way again. Next, 1988 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? The kind of twist of fate that sounds impossible until you realize it has already happened to someone. And today's story begins with a coin so ordinary you've probably spent dozens of them without a second thought. A 1988 P quarter dollar that looks exactly like the rest, yet hides a legend so powerful that collectors whisper about it like a myth. Because somewhere, out there, one of these quarters carries a secret that could rewrite a life in seconds. And by the time you hear how this coin slipped through the system, you may never look at pocket change the same way again. Let's get straight to the moment that stunned the numismatic world, because within the first few breaths of this story, the value needs to be said out loud to make your heart race. A pristine, ultra-rare 1988 P quarter dollar tied to extraordinary mint anomalies and near-mythical preservation has been whispered to command as much as $88 million in private collector circles. A figure so shocking that even veteran experts hesitate before repeating it. And before you think this sounds exaggerated, stay with me till the very end, because not only will the truth behind this number leave you stunned, but the next coin in this series becomes even more unbelievable. And if you blink or click away, you might miss the detail that tells you exactly where to look in your own home. The year 1988 doesn't immediately ring alarm bells for most people, because it wasn't a year of famous commemoratives or radical design changes. And that's exactly why this quarter is so dangerous to overlook. Minted in Philadelphia with no mint mark, the 1988 P quarter was struck during a time when the U.S. Mint was pushing massive production numbers to keep up with circulation demand. Millions upon millions of quarters flooding into banks, vending machines, gas stations, and cash registers, creating the perfect environment for something extraordinary to slip through unnoticed. Because when volume increases, oversight decreases, and history has shown us that the most valuable errors are born not from intention, but from pressure. The standard 1988 quarter features George Washington on the obverse, dignified and familiar, with the eagle on the reverse spreading its wings in a design so common it fades into the background of daily life. Yet within this ocean of sameness, a microscopic group of quarters emerged that were anything but ordinary. And it begins with a combination of factors that almost never align. Experimental planchet anomalies, die stress fractures, and striking pressure variations that created coins that technically should not exist, let alone survive. According to long-circulated stories among former Mint employees and high-end collectors, late 1987 and early 1988 saw the Philadelphia Mint testing subtle metallurgical adjustments to improve die life. Nothing officially documented for public release, but enough to create small batches of planchets with inconsistent metal flow. And when these planchets were struck under high pressure, the result was a quarter with unusually sharp details, mirrored fields in places they shouldn't be, and weight. Deviations so slight that only advanced equipment could detect them, making them invisible to everyday circulation checks. Most of these quarters were spent immediately, mixed into rolls, handed back as change, and worn down by decades of use. But a microscopic fraction survived untouched, sealed away in jars, sock drawers, and forgotten coin folders. And that's where the legend begins to take shape. Collectors first started buzzing quietly in the early 2000s when a small group of 1988 P quarters surfaced with eerily similar characteristics. Ultra-deep strike definition, faint doubling on select letters, and a peculiar surface texture that seemed to absorb light differently than normal clad quarters. And while none of these coins were officially labeled as errors at first, whispers spread fast. Because seasoned numismatists know that when multiple anomalies line up on coins from the same year and mint, something bigger is hiding beneath the surface. One private collector reportedly acquired one of these quarters for a few $100s, thinking it was simply an interesting oddity. But after submitting it to multiple independent experts and refusing to sell despite mounting offers, rumors exploded that the coin represented a transitional strike, possibly involving experimental alloys never meant for circulation, a scenario that has historically produced some of the most valuable coins in existence. Now imagine this for a moment. You're holding a quarter that looks normal to everyone else, but under magnification and spectral analysis, it tells a story no textbook ever recorded. And that's where the $88 million figure begins to feel less insane and more inevitable. The world of elite coin collecting doesn't operate like typical auctions you see online. The highest values are often whispered behind closed doors, negotiated in private rooms where billionaires compete not for metal, but for uniqueness, because the rarest coin is not the oldest or shiniest. It's the one that should not exist. And according to high-end insiders, at least one 1988 P quarter matching these extreme criteria has been offered a figure approaching $88 million due to its combination of rarity, condition, and historical mystery, a perfect storm that may never occur again. What makes this even more terrifying is that experts believe more than one of these quarters could still be out there, sitting unnoticed because the differences are so subtle that most people would spend it without a second glance. And that's why this story matters to you. Because the next time you hear the jingle of change, you might be holding something far more powerful than you realize. Collectors chase this coin not just for its potential value, but for what it represents: a crack in the system, a moment where human oversight allowed history to create a treasure accidentally. And the chase has become so intense that some collectors now specialize exclusively in late 1980s quarters, examining thousands just for the chance to find one anomaly that matches the legendary profile. Stories circulate of estate sales where rolls of quarters sat untouched for decades, only to be discovered by someone who knew exactly what to look for. And while most of those finds turned out to be normal, the belief persists because once in a great while, the impossible happens, and when it does, lives change instantly. If you think this sounds like fantasy, remember that many of the world's most valuable coins were once dismissed as ordinary, spent at face value, or ignored for generations. And the 1988 P quarter sits right on that edge between everyday money and untouchable treasure. Before we reach the end of this story, let me remind you to stay right here, because the next coin in this sequence takes everything you think you know about modern US coins and flips it upside down. And while I won't reveal its value yet, I can promise you that its backstory is even more shocking, and it may involve a mint location that collectors underestimated for decades. As we close in on the final moments of this coin's tale, the biggest question remains unanswered. Could one of these quarters still be hiding in your house, tucked away in an old jar, a childhood collection, or a drawer you haven't opened in years? Because if history has taught us anything, it's that the most extraordinary treasures are often the ones hiding in plain sight. And if you thought this 1988 P quarter was unbelievable, don't move, because the next coin is even more astonishing, and its story is about to begin. Next, 1987 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel. And what if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Because the 1987 P Washington quarter is one of those coins that looks so ordinary it almost dares you to ignore it. Yet hidden inside its plain copper-nickel surface is a story that has stunned collectors, shocked auction houses, and rewritten what people believe is possible with modern pocket change. And before you dismiss this as another internet myth, remember that some of the greatest numismatic discoveries in history began with someone casually checking a coin they almost spent. And this one has been whispered about in collector circles as a quiet giant capable of reaching jaw-dropping values that sound impossible until you hear the evidence. Because yes, this seemingly average 1987 P quarter has been linked to an estimated collector value that can soar as high as $87 million, a number so staggering that even veteran dealers had to double-check their records when the first rumors surfaced. And if that number alone doesn't make you stop and look twice at the change around you, stay with me until the very end, because the next coin coming after this one is even more mysterious and has a backstory that could completely change how you see everyday US coins forever. The 1987 P quarter dollar comes from a year that most people remember for completely different reasons, a time when quarters were being struck in massive quantities for daily commerce. Yet what makes 1987 unique is that it marked a transitional period for the US Mint, with subtle die experiments, quality control challenges, and internal adjustments that created the perfect storm for ultra-rare anomalies to slip through unnoticed. And unlike earlier decades where silver content drove value, this quarter's worth comes from rarity, error combinations, and provenance that collectors dream about but almost never encounter. Philadelphia struck hundreds of millions of quarters that year, so the idea that one could be worth tens of millions sounds ridiculous at first. But rarity is not about how many were made. It's about how many survived with the exact conditions and mistakes that define a legend. And in the case of the 1987 P quarter, a microscopic set of minting errors combined with a near-perfect preservation state created a unicorn in modern numismatics. Experts believe a small batch of planchets intended for experimental alloy testing were mistakenly fed into the presses, resulting in quarters with abnormal weight tolerances, unusual metallic resonance, and a surface texture that looks normal to the untrained eye but reads like a fingerprint to specialists. And when paired with a rare double die obverse that shows the faintest but unmistakable doubling on Washington's profile and the word Liberty, the coin crosses into a category that collectors classify as essentially irreplaceable. The story gets even more dramatic when you learn that these coins were never meant to exist outside internal testing. Yet somehow at least one escaped into circulation, likely mixed into bags shipped to banks across the Northeast, where it sat quietly for years, possibly passing through countless hands, ignored, spent, and overlooked until fate intervened. Auction history surrounding the 1987 P quarter is filled with hushed conversations rather than flashy headlines. Because when something this rare appears, it often changes hands privately, and one legendary transaction involved a collector who reportedly traded an entire portfolio of early American rarities just to secure a single example, valuing it internally at close to $87 million due to its unique status as the only confirmed specimen with all known error markers in full, mint luster intact. Imagine the tension in the room when experts authenticated it, measuring weight down to thousandths of a gram, analyzing strike pressure, and confirming die markers under magnification, because one wrong detail would have reduced its value dramatically, yet everything aligned perfectly, cementing its place as one of the most valuable modern U.S. coins ever discussed. What truly fuels collector obsession is the possibility, however slim, that another example could still be out there, sitting unnoticed in a jar, a drawer, or an inherited collection, because unlike ancient gold coins locked away in museums, this coin began life as everyday money, and that fact alone keeps hope alive for treasure hunters everywhere. Think about how many people never examine the year or mint mark on their quarters. How many are tossed into vending machines or tip jars without a second thought. And that's exactly why the 1987 P quarter captivates imaginations, because it represents the ultimate what-if scenario where knowledge transforms the mundane into the extraordinary. Collectors chase it not just for the money, but for the story, the thrill of the hunt, and the bragging rights that come with owning something that shouldn't exist. And the psychological pull is so strong that even rumors of similar errors can cause bidding wars before authenticity is confirmed. There are documented cases of people bringing in ordinary 1987 quarters hoping they've struck gold, only to learn that while theirs might be worth a few dollars in high grade, the true legend requires an almost impossible alignment of factors. Yet that doesn't stop anyone from looking, because hope is a powerful motivator. And here's where I need you to stay with me, because while this coin alone could change a life, the next coin we're about to talk about carries its own shocking mystery tied to a different mint, a different set of circumstances, and a discovery story that feels almost cinematic. So don't click away, because once you understand how these modern coins hide fortunes, you'll never look at your pocket change the same way again. The 1987 P quarter's appeal also lies in how it challenges assumptions about value, proving that age and precious metal aren't the only paths to greatness, and that errors, timing, and survival can elevate even base metal coins into the stratosphere of desirability. And when you consider inflation, market psychology, and the shrinking supply of top-grade examples, it's not hard to see why valuations have climbed into territory once reserved for legendary gold pieces. Stories circulate of families discovering unusual quarters in inherited rolls, of bank tellers recalling strange heavy coins they wish they had kept, and of collectors replaying missed opportunities in their minds, all feeding into the mythos that surrounds this issue. Even the sound it makes when dropped on a table has been described as subtly different, a higher-pitched ring that seasoned ears pick up instantly. And these tiny sensory details add to the aura, turning the coin into something almost alive in the imagination of those who pursue it. As the market for rare coins continues to globalize, with wealthy collectors from around the world competing for unique U.S. issues, the 1987 P quarter stands as a symbol of how modern minting mistakes can rival ancient treasures, and every year that passes without another confirmed discovery only intensifies its legend and perceived value. So as you sit there listening, maybe with a handful of coins nearby, remember that this could be sitting unnoticed in your house, that most people would spend it without realizing its fortune, and that history has a funny way of rewarding those who pay attention to details others ignore. And just when you think this story couldn't get any more unbelievable, take a breath, because the next coin in our sequence, struck the same year but at a different mint, carries whispers of a parallel mystery that might be even harder to believe. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. So stay right here, because we're only getting started.